The hum of the ancient force-bound artifact was almost inaudible, a low thrum against the very fabric of reality, yet its resonance echoed through millennia. It lay buried, deeper than any Sith or Jedi had dared to dig, beneath the petrified heart of a forgotten world. This was no holocron, no simple data storage of ancient lore. This was a resonance chamber, crafted by beings whose understanding of the Force transcended light and darkness, built to contain a truth so volatile, so fundamentally disruptive, that its very existence threatened to unravel the meticulously woven tapestry of the galaxy. The Jedi Council buried it. The Sith Lords knew of it, but feared its power. For centuries, its existence was erased, a whisper confined to the deepest, most terrifying nightmares of Force sensitives. Until now. Until a tremor in the Force, a desperate act of defiance against the preordained, began to stir its slumber. You thought you knew the galaxy. You thought the lines between light and dark were clear, etched in kyber and tempered by dogma. You were wrong. The true history of the Force, of power, and of destiny has been manipulated, erased, and deliberately obscured by those who claim to protect you. What if I told you that the fate of Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, was not a tragic fall, but a deliberate manipulation, a carefully orchestrated symphony of betrayal and forgotten knowledge, designed to birth something far more terrifying than an empire? What if the balance you were taught to revere was nothing more than a carefully constructed lie, a cage to keep the galaxy blind to its true potential and its true horrors? We begin not with the dramatic clash of lightsabers, but with a quiet, insidious whisper in the mind of a desperate man. Anakin Skywalker, poised on the precipice, did not run to the Jedi Council. He saw their hypocrisy, their stagnation, their failure to protect those they swore to serve. He saw their willingness to sacrifice not just individuals, but entire planets for a greater good they rarely defined. He had watched Ahsoka, his own Padawan, cast aside by the very institution he swore allegiance to. He had seen their dogma blind them to the suffering right before their eyes. The Jedi feared chaos, but in their rigid adherence to order, they became brittle, easily shattered. They feared the dark side, yet their suppression of emotion, their denial of true passion, only fueled the shadows within. Palpatine, the ultimate manipulator, understood this perfectly. He didn't offer a path to darkness. He offered a path to control, to power beyond the stifling confines of Jedi philosophy. He offered a way to defy death itself, a promise whispered from the depths of forgotten Sith rituals, a power that even the most ancient Jedi masters deemed an abomination. This was the true temptation, not simply power, but the ultimate authority over life and death, the ability to rewrite the very laws of existence. The ancient teachings of the Sith, unlike the Jedi's disciplined suppression, embraced the full spectrum of emotion, channeling raw passion into formidable power. This was not merely about wielding lightning or choking foes. It was about bending reality to one's will, about manipulating the very essence of the Force itself. Palpatine's lure was not simply the preservation of Padme, but the tantalizing prospect of mastery over death, an ability whispered about in hushed tones even among the most reclusive Sith cults. This was the legendary essence transfer, a forbidden art that allowed a Force sensitive to transcend mortal form, to inhabit another, or even to resurrect. The Jedi had long since purged any mention of it from their archives, deeming it an affront to the natural order of the Force, a violation of the cycle of life and death. But for Anakin, desperate to save the one he loved, the natural order was a cruel, uncaring master. He had seen enough of its indifference. Palpatine, the insidious serpent, painted a picture of a galactic truth the Jedi refused to acknowledge: that the Force, in its purest, untamed form, was neither light nor dark, but a primal energy to be harnessed, not feared. He revealed that true power lay not in denying one's emotions, but in mastering them, in shaping them into a weapon, a tool for creation or destruction. He spoke of ancient Sith lords who had prolonged their lives for centuries, not through crude cloning, but through the seamless transfer of consciousness, preserving their knowledge, their power, their very souls. Anakin, who had always struggled with the rigid emotional constraints of the Jedi, found liberation in this revelation. His anger, his fear, his possessive love for Padme, these were not weaknesses to be suppressed, but untapped reservoirs of power waiting to be unleashed. The dam within him broke, and the torrent of his repressed emotions flowed freely, channeled by Palpatine into devastating force abilities. He felt a surge of exhilaration, a sense of control he had never experienced within the confines of the Jedi Order. This was not merely the dark side. This was freedom, the power to defy fate, to command destiny itself. But this power came with a price, a chilling requirement that Palpatine subtly introduced. The ability to transfer essence was not a simple spell. It demanded a suitable vessel, a host whose very blood could accept and integrate new midi-chlorians, a being rare and powerful in the Force. Palpatine, with a chillingly casual air, suggested that such unique individuals might be found within the very Jedi Order that had so consistently disappointed Anakin. The idea of experimentation, of sacrifice, of using others as mere tools for a greater purpose, was abhorrent to the Jedi, but for a desperate Anakin, consumed by the fear of Padme's impending death, the lines began to blur. The Jedi had sacrificed others for their greater good. Why should he not do the same for the one person who mattered most to him? The seeds of a deeper corruption were sown, not through overt evil, but through a perversion of love and a twisted logic that justified any means to achieve a desired end. The list of potential hosts that Palpatine presented to Anakin was a chilling testament to his meticulous planning and his utter disregard for life. It contained names familiar to Anakin, names of Jedi Masters he had fought alongside, disagreed with, or even resented. Masters like Luminara Unduli, whose rigid adherence to the Jedi Code had always grated on Anakin's more compassionate nature. Palpatine did not demand immediate action, merely planted the suggestion, allowing the corrosive idea to fester in Anakin's mind as Padme's due date loomed closer. The pressure of time, the fear of loss, warped Anakin's judgment, making the unthinkable seem not just plausible, but necessary. He continued to play the part of the loyal Jedi, reporting on political machinations, subtly misdirecting the Council, all while his true allegiance shifted, irrevocably, to the shadowy figure who promised him salvation. The Jedi, increasingly desperate to curb Palpatine's growing power, finally decided to confront him. A fatal miscalculation born of their own rigid adherence to procedure and their underestimation of the true depth of the Sith Lord's deception. Mace Windu, accompanied by a small contingent of Masters, confronted Palpatine, demanding his resignation. This was the moment Palpatine had been waiting for, the moment to solidify Anakin's turn, to make him an accomplice in an act that would forever sever his ties to the Jedi. The confrontation was brutal, swift, and entirely orchestrated. Palpatine, far from being overwhelmed, reveled in the chaos, showcasing a brutal, unrestrained power that stunned the Jedi Masters. He moved with a speed and ferocity that defied their expectations, a whirlwind of dark side energy, cutting down Jedi in a blur of crimson and purple. Kit Fisto, again Kohler, Sizzy Teen, all fell before Palpatine's unleashed power, their calculated movements rendered useless against his unrestrained aggression. The arrival of Anakin was no accident. He burst into the chamber, not as a savior for the Jedi, but as a silent, terrifying force of nature, his lightsaber ignited, his eyes burning with a desperate resolve. Mace Windu, with his Vopad mastery, sensed the hidden darkness within Anakin, the corruption that had taken root. but even he could not fully comprehend the depths of his apprentice's transformation. The ensuing clash was not a battle of light versus dark, but of desperate, dying order against unleashed, nascent chaos. Anakin, fueled by his fear and his nascent dark side powers, struck with a ferocity that surprised even Mace. He saw not revered masters, but obstacles, targets, individuals whose lives were less important than the one life he desperately clung to. When Luminara fell, struck down by Anakin's brutal force push, her unconscious body became the ultimate prize, the living proof of Palpatine's chilling plan. She was strong in the Force, a suitable vessel, a living testament to the price of defiance against the rising tide of darkness. Anakin, in a moment of chilling detachment, saw her not as a fellow Jedi, but as a means to an end, a sacrifice for Padme. The journey into Palpatine's hidden laboratory beneath his residence was a descent into a nightmare realm, a place where the very air crackled with malevolence. The stench was not merely that of decay, but of something far more insidious. A spiritual corrosion, the accumulated residue of countless forbidden experiments and unspeakable acts. Ancient Sith runes, scrawled in blood-red ink, pulsed with a sickly light, their alien geometry twisting the very fabric of the Force. Massive bacta tanks, filled with a viscous, sickly green fluid, lined the walls, their opaque surfaces hinting at unspeakable horrors within. Anakin, for all his exposure to the dark side, felt a momentary recoil, a primal urge to flee. But the desperation to save Padme, the intoxicating promise of power, swiftly overcame his revulsion. He had crossed a threshold, not just physically, but spiritually. He was no longer merely tempted by the dark. He was immersed in it, a willing participant in its grand, horrifying design. Luminara, unduly, unconscious and vulnerable, was placed within one of the vile bacta tanks, her life force probed and analyzed by ancient, humming machinery that spoke of eons of dark side experimentation. Palpatine, with an almost scientific detachment, revealed the true purpose of Project Necromancer, not merely to transfer consciousness, but to reanimate, to imbue a new form with the essence of another, even across the chasm of death. Luminara, with her potent connection to the Force, was a prime candidate, her very being a canvas upon which to paint a twisted masterpiece of reanimation. But her immediate purpose was far more sinister. She was to be the key, the living subject from which to extract the knowledge needed to perfect the essence transfer, to prepare a vessel capable of holding Padme's fading life force. This was a perversion of life, a defiance of the natural. Orders so profound it echoed through the very foundations of the Force. The Jedi believed in living in harmony with the Force. The Sith, as embodied by Palpatine, sought to dominate it, to twist its laws to their will, to achieve ultimate control even over death itself. While Luminara's life force was meticulously scrutinized, Palpatine returned to the Senate, orchestrating a masterstroke of political deception. The edited footage of the Jedi insurrection, a carefully constructed narrative of Jedi aggression and his own heroic survival, thanks to Anakin's timely intervention, was broadcast across the galaxy. The Jedi, once revered peacekeepers, were now painted as power-hungry traitors, their desperate attempt to save the Republic twisted into a selfish grab for control. The applause from his supporters was deafening, a chilling testament to the fragility of truth in the face of fear and carefully crafted lies. Padme, horrified by the sudden descent into authoritarianism, watched from the sidelines, her pleas and protests falling on deaf ears. The Republic, the democracy she had fought so tirelessly to protect, was crumbling around her, replaced by the iron fist of a newly empowered chancellor. The seeds of the Empire were sown, not through overt conquest, but through the insidious manipulation of public opinion, the weaponization of fear, and the systematic dismantling of truth. Anakin, now fully committed to Palpatine's vision, found himself a willing participant in the unfolding nightmare. He moved with a chilling efficiency, his compassion replaced by a cold resolve, his moral compass shattered by the promise of saving Padme. He returned to the Jedi Temple, not as a devoted knight, but as a predator cloaked in familiar robes. The Council, reeling from the attack on Palpatine and the public outcry against them, were vulnerable, their faith shaken, their judgment clouded by fear. Anakin, knowing their routines, their weaknesses, became Palpatine's unseen hand, a ghost moving through the hallowed halls, subtly guiding events, manipulating individuals, and gathering vital information for the coming purge, he observed. Their desperate attempts to understand what had happened, their futile debates, their clinging to an order that was already dead. Each moment he spent in their midst, knowing the truth he concealed, further solidified his detachment, his contempt for their perceived weakness, the Jedi. Blinded by their own dogma and their inability to comprehend the true extent of Palpatine's dark power, struggled to formulate a counter-strategy. They were soldiers, not politicians, and Palpatine had masterfully turned the tide of public opinion against them. Their warnings about his autocratic tendencies were dismissed as desperate attempts to cling to power, their pleas for a return to democracy drowned out by the roar of the public, clamoring for stability and security at any cost. Even Obi-Wan, Anakin's closest friend and mentor, failed to see the rot festering within his former apprentice. He saw only a troubled young man, burdened by the war, struggling with his emotions. He would not, believe that Anakin would betray everything they stood for. This blind spot, this desperate clinging to the image of the good Jedi, was a weakness Palpatine exploited with surgical precision. As the galaxy teetered on the brink, Anakin continued his clandestine work, preparing for the inevitable. He delved deeper into the forbidden knowledge Palpatine offered, learning not just to wield the raw power of the dark side, but to master its subtler manipulations, the arts of deception, of mental subjugation, of bending the will of others, without them ever knowing. He saw how Palpatine had woven a web of lies so intricate, so pervasive, that the truth became irrelevant. This was the true power of the Sith, not just brute strength, but the ability to control perception, to warp reality itself until the oppressed welcomed their chains. Anakin, in his desperate quest to save one life, was becoming a master of this insidious art, a puppet master pulling the strings of destiny, all while believing he was merely protecting his own. The galaxy, caught in this elaborate deception, marched blindly towards its own enslavement, unaware of the horrific price that would be paid in the name of order and security. The night Order 66 was executed was not a sudden, brutal onslaught. For Anakin, it was the culmination of weeks, months, of meticulous planning, of psychological conditioning, of the slow, agonizing erosion of his conscience. He had already chosen his path, already embraced the darkness. When the order came, it was merely the final, inevitable step. But unlike the blindly obedient clones, Anakin acted with a cold, calculated precision, a surgical strike against the heart of the Jedi Order. He knew the temple's layout, the escape routes, the hidden passages. He knew the fighting styles of his former masters, their weaknesses, their habits. He became a wraith, a phantom of betrayal, his blue blade cutting down those he once called family, not with rage, but with a chilling, almost mechanical efficiency. Each fallen Jedi was a stepping stone, a necessary sacrifice on his path to saving Padme. Yet, even in the depths of his depravity, a faint tremor of his former self lingered. He saw the faces of younglings, their innocent eyes wide with terror, and for a fleeting moment, a pang of something akin to remorse flickered within him. But Palpatine's insidious whispers, the image of Padme dying, the promise of ultimate power, quickly extinguished it. This was the true tragedy of Anakin Skywalker, not that he became a monster, but that he justified every monstrous act as a necessary evil, a painful but ultimately righteous choice driven by love. He believed he was saving her, and in doing so he destroyed himself and nearly the entire galaxy. The Jedi, for all their wisdom, had failed to see the warning signs, had dismissed his emotional struggles, had pushed him further and further to the edge, until he found solace in the arms of the very evil they fought. The screams of the dying Jedi echoed through the Force, a cacophony of agony and despair, a symphony of destruction that resonated across the stars. This was not merely the death of an order. It was the death of an ideal, the extinguishing of a flame that had burned for 1,000 generations. The Force itself seemed to cry out, recoiling from the immense darkness that had been unleashed. The very stars seemed to dim, cloaked in a pervasive shadow that spread from the heart of the galaxy, swallowing world after world in its oppressive embrace. The Galactic Republic, once a beacon of democracy, dissolved into the iron grip of the Empire, its citizens trading freedom for the illusion of security, their voices silenced by fear and the crushing weight of an all-encompassing tyranny. This was the galaxy's descent into true darkness, a descent fueled by one man's desperate love and another's insatiable hunger for ultimate power. As the Republic fell and the Empire rose, Palpatine, with Anakin now his devoted apprentice, embarked on the true purpose of Project Necromancer. Luminara Unduli, her essence meticulously analyzed, became the unwilling key to unlocking the deepest secrets of essence transfer. But the ritual was not simple. It required not just a powerful Force sensitive, but an unwilling sacrifice. A vessel that resisted, whose life force could be forcibly ripped from its form to fuel the transfer. The agony Luminara endured, amplified by her connection to the Force, sent ripples of despair through the dark side, a chilling echo of the price demanded for ultimate power over life and death. Anakin, witnessing the horrific process, found himself further desensitized, his emotions hardening into a shell of cold indifference. He was no longer the boy who cried for his mother, no longer the Jedi who fought for justice. He was a weapon, honed by desperation and forged in the fires of forbidden knowledge. The initial attempts at essence transfer were brutal, messy failures, each one a testament to the sheer unnaturalness of the act. Cloned bodies, meticulously grown and enhanced, rejected the fragmented essences, their forms twisting into grotesque parodies of life before disintegrating into dust. The air in the lab grew thick with the stench of failure and the lingering echoes of tormented souls. But Palpatine, with his ancient Sith knowledge, was undeterred. He understood the nuances, the precise alignment of the Force, the delicate balance of light and dark required to bridge the chasm of mortality. He sought not just to transfer life, but to perfect it, to create a vessel capable of holding a Force-sensitive consciousness indefinitely, immune to the ravages of time and the finality of death. This was the ultimate ambition of the Sith, to conquer not just the galaxy, but the very concept of mortality, to achieve a dark immortality that transcended even the Force itself. The true horror of essence transfer was slowly revealed to Anakin. It wasn't merely about preserving life. It was about consuming it. The process required a constant influx of life force, a draining of other Force sensitives, to maintain the integrity of the transferred essence. Palpatine wasn't just offering to save Padmé. He was offering to turn her into a parasitic entity, forever reliant on the suffering of others. This was the ultimate perversion, a grotesque mockery of life, a cosmic horror disguised as salvation. Anakin, trapped in his desperate bargain, began to understand the true cost of his choices. He was not just saving Padmé. He was damning her to an existence as a living battery, a prisoner in a perpetual state of unnatural existence. The realization was a bitter pill, but one he swallowed, for the alternative, Padmé's death, was unthinkable. This was the true genius of Palpatine's manipulation. He had convinced Anakin to choose a fate worse than death, believing it was the only way to save the one he loved. The chains he had forged for himself were now also binding Padmé to a living nightmare. The final, horrifying truth of Project Necromancer, of essence transfer, and of Palpatine's grand design, was a revelation that would crack the very foundation of the galaxy. It wasn't about saving Padmé, not truly. It was about control, about creating a perfected vessel, a conduit of raw force energy that Palpatine himself could inhabit, a means of transcending his own mortality and becoming an omnipresent, godlike entity. He didn't just want to rule the galaxy. He wanted to become the Force, to bend all life to his will, to achieve a dark apotheosis that would forever erase the concepts of free will and individual destiny. Padme was merely a test subject, a temporary host, a means to an end. Her life, her essence, would be consumed, absorbed into the ever-expanding consciousness of the Emperor, a sacrifice to fuel his ultimate ascension. Anakin, witnessing the chilling finality of Palpatine's intentions, was confronted with the ultimate betrayal. He had traded everything, his friends, his honor, his very soul, for a promise that was a lie. The realization was a crushing blow, a belated awakening to the true horror he had unleashed. His beloved Padmé was not to be saved, but absorbed. Her identity erased, her very being devoured by the monstrous ambition of his master. The galaxy he had sought to protect was now enslaved, its people living under the tyrannical thumb of an eternal emperor, a cosmic vampire feeding on the life force of countless worlds. The Jedi, for all their flaws, had been the only bulwark against this ultimate evil, and he, Anakin Skywalker, had been instrumental in their destruction. Thought the echoes of this shattered truth would ripple through the Force for millennia. The balance was not restored. It was irrevocably broken, replaced by a suffocating darkness that permeated every corner of the cosmos. The Chosen One, meant to bring balance, had instead plunged the galaxy into an era of unparalleled tyranny. All for a love that was twisted, manipulated, and ultimately destroyed by the very power he sought to harness. This is the true, hidden history of the fall, a tale not of a simple turn to the dark side, but of an ancient forbidden's power unleashed, of mythic truths unearthed, and of a galaxy forever marked by the ultimate betrayal. Once you have seen beyond the veil, once you have understood the true price of such power, you can never again see the galaxy the same way. The Force is not merely light and dark. It is a tapestry woven with threads of unimaginable power, waiting to be pulled apart by those daring enough to defy its ancient laws. What will you do with this forbidden knowledge? Will you seek to restore the balance, or will you too be tempted to pull the threads and unravel the very fabric of reality?